Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with part 1 of my January wrap-up. I apologize for this being later than usual. There were a lot of reasons for that, a lot of things going on, but we're here now, and I also want to say welcome. I know I've gotten some new subscribers lately, so welcome to all of you guys, and I hope you enjoy yourself. One of the reasons that these wrap-ups are late is that I was really focusing on finishing up a very exciting secret collab project. I will link my video down below and the whole playlist, but a ton of different booktubers, we all got together and read the winners, or in some cases runners-up, for the last 10 years of Goodreads Choice Awards. So that was really, really exciting. I will link mine and the playlist as I said. So let's get into the books I read in January. The first one I finished was The Case of the Left-Handed Lady by Nancy Springer. This is the second book in the Enola Holmes mystery series, which is a series imagining if Sherlock and Mycroft Holmes had had a sister, a younger sister named Enola. She is really, really smart as well. And she, in this book, I don't want to give too much away, but she is kind of like using her wits to stay one step ahead of her family, who are trying to make her do things she doesn't want to do. And I was overall really enjoying this one. I really like Enola as a character, and I loved seeing just how smart and competent and adaptable she is. I like the writing style. These are also very short and they're very engaging to read. But the thing that kind of brought this one down for me was like the ending and the solution. Like the solution to the mystery is something that we today know is like pretty much impossible, and that just like distracted me, because obviously this book is set in a time period where the characters wouldn't know that, but like the author does and the readers do. So I just thought that was an odd choice. I guess it's possible that that could be explained in a future book, but that was the only thing that kind of like, I mean, it did affect my feeling on the end of the book, because it felt like the solution didn't make sense and kind of came out of nowhere. But overall, I did enjoy this, and I gave The Case of the Left-Handed Lady 3.75 stars. You'll notice a lot of these books are going to be pretty short ones, because me and Kelly were doing our short stack readathon. So next, I finished Postcolonial Banter, Manzoor Khan. This is a poetry collection, and I want to thank my friend Hannah from Ball Gowns and Books for introducing me to this author. She talks about her very highly, and I absolutely see why. This was fantastic. You can probably tell from all of my like sticky tabs and everything, but I thought this was a brilliant collection. One thing I really like and I think is really interesting is that on quite a few of the poems, the author has like sections kind of explaining like the context or kind of like the image she was using, and not in a way that like tells you what to think about the poem, but like she wants you to have the full picture of what it is, like where the poem is situated and what its context is, because she says in the introduction that she wants the poems to like kind of challenge you and like make you ask questions, but she doesn't want to make you like not like ask what the poem means or something. I'm just going to read what she says about it. I'm not interested in writing poetry for people to puzzle over or feel intimidated by. I'd rather you puzzle over your reactions and responses. And I really liked that. I really liked her style. There were some poems that I felt especially powerful. Like there were several about her family that were really beautiful, and like I just think all of the poems like were so interesting and thoughtful. And one thing I really loved is throughout the collection how she kind of grapples with the idea of stereotypes and fighting stereotypes, and specifically how when you set out to fight stereotypes, you are still giving them power over your identity and who you are. And I thought that was so interesting and smart. Yeah, I thought this was great. It's hard to review poetry, but like I thought the construction of this was really great. I really resonated with like a lot of the themes she's talking about, and I just think it was really well done. I gave Postcolonial Banter 5 stars. Very excited to read more from this author. Next, I finished Women and Power, a Manifesto by Mary Beard. This is a very short book that is a compilation of 2 talks that Mary Beard gave, and they are slightly edited when she put them together, but for the most part it's like the same content from I think more than a decade ago. And this was a present from my wonderful friend Olivia-Savannah from Olivia's Catastrophe, and I finally got to it. And I really, really liked this. This is looking at, of course, women and power, and specifically how like those things have been connected, like how women have been shut out of power since basically antiquity, and she connects those things to like present day as well in a way that I thought was very thoughtful and didn't like overreach. And I thought this was really well done. It's very clear and very compelling. Like it's very concise, but I think she still does a good job of like giving examples and making connections and just writing in an interesting way, even though it is a very short piece. My one critique, and again, these talks were first given, I think, several years ago, so that probably is why, but it's not especially intersectional. Mary Beard does use a few women of color as examples, but at no point does she really deal with how the interaction of women in power changes when those women are non-white, which that might have been not part of her focus, but I think there should have been some kind of disclaimer about that, maybe, I don't know. And similarly, this is a very binary discussion. Like, she specifically talks the entire time about men and women, and again, that is something that probably is due to when these talks were first given, and also maybe she didn't want to like overstep herself by talking about things that she doesn't have as much like knowledge of, but once again, I think like a disclaimer could have helped with that. So this wasn't perfect, but I do completely understand why this is such an important text. I'm really glad I finally read it, and I gave Women in Power 4.5 stars. Next, I have a book that looks giant, but I actually only read this like first little chunk here, because this is The Collected Fantasy of George MacDonald by, of course, George MacDonald, and I read Phantastes, which is one of his most famous works. It's a novel, and the subtitle is A Fairy Romance, but I want to stress that it's a romance in the sense of like classic literature, you know, not like a romantic relationship between people, but like romance as in the Romantic period, you know. And this is going to be such a hard story to review because I absolutely loved it, but it's very, very hard to explain what it's about, or like how, like, this is a story where like the experience of it is something that is very hard to communicate. And also there are specific things that I was so moved by and that I connected to so much that are very like personal and hard to articulate. So I'm going to do my best. But this is following a young man as our main character who one day crosses into fairy. And it's about like his adventures there. I mean, adventures is kind of a weird way to put it because it is very character focused. The writing is beautiful, and it is in a lot of ways a very like quiet and slow paced story. But there are some like, you know, dramatic things that happen along the way. He's learning more about the world, this fairy world, and he's trying to get back home. And he also meets some characters along the way and tries to figure out like just what he's doing there and how he can get back home. There's also a few story within a story moments, and yeah, this is like such a strange book to describe, but I loved it, and I really see why it was such a huge influence on so many writers, including C.S. Lewis. Like, he describes the first time he read this as like having crossed a great frontier, and like after reading this book, I totally understand that, and I really see why this is a book that had such a profound impact on so many people, like so many writers especially. Yeah, as I was saying, the writing is really, really beautiful, and like just George MacDonald's way of writing I love because it is lovely and descriptive, but not in a way that feels overwhelming. Like, there are definitely some parts where it was maybe a little bit more flowery than I think it needed to be, but overall it is a fairly accessible style while still being very classic and still having that fairy tale feeling. I also really liked our main character. Yeah, he's just kind of doing his best, you know? And it's not like, it's sort of a character study, but not in the way that it often is, because it's not really about getting to know him. It's about him getting to know himself. I don't know. I'm doing a horrible job of explaining this book. I also thought the atmosphere was really, really engaging and really interesting, and yeah, there were some parts of this that were very creepy, but for the most part, it's just like I think George MacDonald does such a good job of communicating that kind of like strangeness, like the beauty, but also the frighteningness, the fear that is part of Fairyland, you know, in like an old world kind of fair folk way, and I loved that. I also was really pleasantly surprised by the kind of like sneaky feminism of this book. There's not like a ton of female characters, but I feel like the way they were handled, like the way their stories were handled, was much more progressive than you usually get from Victorian authors. And there are definitely still some moments in his work that I've read so far where it's like, oh yeah, okay, this was written by a Victorian. But for the most part, I've been very impressed by how like ahead of his time he is in a lot of ways. Like, there's this really fantastic moment, like it's in a story within a story part, that I thought was just really interesting and really well done. And one of the things that happened is, I don't want to get into too much detail, but basically there is a magical element to this like connection between these two characters, a man and a woman, and the man kind of like compels her to come to him and talk to him, and he's basically fallen in love with her at first sight, you know, as you do in fairy tales. And he asks her if she loves him back, if she could ever love him back, and she says, like, no, because you have power over me. I am not free, so I cannot love you. And just that idea of like consent and like love having to be a free choice, I just, like, that's a very basic concept, but that's not something that I feel like a lot of writers in this time period were articulating. And it was just like a really small moment in the story, but I thought that was really well done. And like, honestly, some of the consent in this book was done better than like some modern writers I've read. But yeah, like, again, this isn't like a feminist book, like it's not like intending to do that, but I just really appreciated the way that a lot of the parts involving female characters were handled. And then one of the big things about this book, and one of the reasons that it makes it so hard to describe, is the ending. I found it so beautiful and healing and like comforting in a very bittersweet but also uplifting way. And this is one of the things that like just I had a very personal, like visceral response to it in the best way, and that is not really something it's easy to like review, so make of all of this what you will. I really loved Phantastes. I have a very hard time explaining why and figuring out who to recommend this to, but I personally really loved it. Like, of course there were some parts of the story that engaged me more than others. Like, it's not a perfect book, but it almost feels like a perfect book, you know? And I gave Phantastes 5 stars. I can't remember if I said this at the beginning, but all of the people and links I mentioned will be in the description box, and also content warnings. Next, I finished The Girl Who Soared Over Fairyland and Cut the Moon in Two by Catherine M. Valenti. This was part of me and Marines doing our Fairyland read-along, which is part of the Not a Genre Book Club. I will link that live show down below. And this is the 3rd book in the series, and this has been my least favorite so far. I don't anticipate that changing. Like, there were things I enjoyed about it. Like, I continue to really love our main characters. I love the way that Catherine M. Valenti explores her themes and like uses those in the story. I also really enjoyed some of the side characters, and I thought the ending of this one came together really well, and I was so impressed at how the author could like connect these things that you thought had no connection. I thought that was really good. But overall, this one, as I said, it wasn't as much, I didn't love it as much as the others. For one thing, it felt really slow and meandering. Like, the first half of this book, like, not a lot of pertinent things really happen, which is frustrating. And also, I don't like when like the main group of characters are separated for a long time, and that's basically this book. So like the whole first chunk of this book, I'm like, Catherine, where is Saturday? Where is A through L? I want everyone back together. And so that made for a kind of frustrating reading experience, as well as the fact that I feel like in this book, the whimsical aspects felt much more forced. And part of that, I think, was just like the meandering plot and the fact that like some of these side characters or side quest type things, it's like an interesting idea, but I'm like, why are we spending so much time here? The plot was also just very convoluted and messy. I am very confused about some of it. Like, Mari was saying that she has read this book like several times at this point, and she still doesn't really know like everything that happens at the end, which made me feel better. And then also, I didn't love some of the like side characters and adventures as much as I usually do. Like, there were some that I really enjoyed, but like, I don't know, I just didn't have like that connection and that investment in like some of the people that she meets along the way. But I did really love like the writing. Like, some of the lines in here are beautiful, and as I said, like there were other things about this I really liked. So I gave it 3.5 stars, but it's not my favorite. And I do also want to mention, it was brought to my attention that like one of the like characters or beings that appears in this book is actually a very important one in Islam, and that it's not like the way it's used in the story is like a little weird. Like, it's basically used in the story as like a fairy tale, like kind of fun quirk, and it's actually something that's really important in that religion. So I did also want to mention that. But yeah, not my favorite, but I am continuing to enjoy the series overall. Like, I've really enjoyed all the other books, so that was kind of the one-off. Then I finished Shabbat Sabotage by Emma Carlson Byrne. This is a very short mystery novel. We are following our main character Maya, who is going to Jewish camp over the summer, and she's really worried about this because she's afraid of the water. Very understandably, she had a near drowning experience recently, and for some unaccountable reason, her parents are like, it's time you got over that. We're gonna send you to a sleepaway camp where you're gonna have to swim, and we're not there to like watch you. I just think that is so weird. Like, I don't have kids, but that just seems a little weird to me that like, this happened really recently and they're like, it's time you move on. We're not gonna be there to keep an eye on you, but it's fine. But anyway, so she goes to the camp and she is also feeling kind of homesick, but she does start making friends with some of the other kids there. And then one day, some of the things that they need to lead Shabbat disappear. And so Maya and her friends have to try and figure out like what happened to them, if somebody took them, and try and get them back. And I really liked this. I really enjoyed Maya. I really liked getting to see her make friends with some of the other girls, and I really appreciated the way that her first impressions of them were sometimes not the whole picture. Like there's a couple, like there's like this one girl who's set up as like the mean girl, and I feel like the way she's ultimately handled is much more nuanced than that, which I really appreciated. I also really liked the way the camp counselors were like characterized and the way they interacted with Maya. They were just very like understanding and compassionate about why she was so afraid of the water, and they like worked with her on it, but they weren't like embarrassing her or trying to rush her. I don't know. It just was a nice change from the way her parents were super blasé about it. So I liked that as well. Aside from the like parents and handling the near drowning thing in a way that I found very odd, the only other thing that I didn't really care for is there were just a few like weird throwaway references, like kind of jokes almost, about like the Israeli army that I just thought those were weird in a book published in 2022. I don't think the book is trying to like take a stance on that or anything, but I did just want to mention that for people to be aware of. But overall, I did really enjoy this, and I gave Shabbat Sabotage 4 stars. Next, I finished The Dragon with the Chocolate Heart by Stephanie Burgess. I am so excited I finally got to this one. I've had it for a very long time, and this is the first book in a companion trilogy, and our main character is Aventurine, and near the beginning of the story, she gets turned from a dragon into a human girl, and she is very upset about this. She does not want to be human, but she ends up finding her way to a human city. I don't remember if it's like the capital of this kingdom. I think it is. And she has discovered that one thing she does love about the human world is chocolate. And she ends up getting a job as kind of an apprentice at this like chocolate shop or bakery, and yeah, like it's kind of about like her figuring that out, trying to navigate the human world, but also like wanting to get back home to her family too. And I thought this was really, really lovely. I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad because I read another middle grade series by Stephanie Burgess that I should have loved, and it just really didn't do much for me, but I felt like she was an author I could enjoy if I found the right book or series, so I'm glad that I really liked this one. I really enjoyed Aventurine as a main character. She's just so funny and interesting, and I especially enjoyed seeing how her dragony characteristics would sometimes help her in like the business world. I found that really fun, and I just really enjoyed her as a character. I really liked seeing her like slowly get to meet people and make friends. I loved the chocolate and the baking aspects. That was like one of my favorite parts in the book. I really liked the way the family elements were handled, and I just really enjoyed the side characters in general. Yeah, I had a really wonderful time with this. There were a few parts of the plot that I found personally a little frustrating, or that I think didn't need to happen that way, but overall I really enjoyed this, and I also really loved the ending and the way that pulled everything together, and I'm really impressed with the way that Stephanie Burgess could kind of like balance the different things that she needed to do to make an ending to this story satisfying. But yeah, I thought this was lovely, and I gave The Dragon with the Chocolate Heart 4 stars. Next, I finished Finding God in the Universe by Guy Consolmagno. This is a very short book in the My Theology series, which are, you know, short nonfiction books that are by specific theologians and like about their like beliefs and practices, and also kind of connected topics. So this one is Guy Consolmagno is one of the Vatican's observatory scientists, and also a priest. So he talks a lot about like the intersection of religion and science, and I really like that. That's a topic I find very interesting, and I ended up really enjoying this. It wasn't that I wasn't liking the beginning, but I just, for some reason, it wasn't what I expected it to be. I just really enjoyed this. There's 3 different sections. I really liked them all. I think he did a really good job of like balancing the elements that were like about his experience and his life with the kind of wider ideas he was talking about. And I especially really liked the way he made comparisons between religion and science, and how there are some elements in the pursuit of both of those things that have some similarities or commonalities. I really liked that, so I just really got a lot out of this, and I'm excited to read more by Guy Consolmagno. I have wanted to read him for a while. I have a couple books by him, but I hadn't gotten to any yet, so I'm glad I really enjoyed this one, and I gave Finding God in the Universe 4.5 stars. Next, I finished The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffin. This is a fantasy novel that has a really, really gorgeous cover underneath it, which is always nice. I think that's beautiful. And this is a kind of climate fantasy. So in this world, there's like this group of witches who have powers based on the seasons, and they use these powers to kind of like keep the weather and like natural disasters and natural elements under control, but it's becoming harder and harder to do that. And our main character, Clara, is one of the special people who doesn't just have powers from one season. She's an Ever, so she has powers from all of them. And things are getting worse in like the wider world. More witches are dying because they're not able to like their power isn't enough to continue to like take care of the environment and everything. And Clara is really reluctant to use her power in the way that her teachers and mentors want her to, because of some things that have happened in her past. And then also there is a romance element, and there is just kind of this like general conflict, these high stakes about Clara needing to master her abilities so that she can like protect people, basically. And I am really bummed because this was just the epitome of a mediocre book. Like, it was fine. It was very okay. I gave it 3 stars. I had almost no strong feelings about it, which I think I'm gonna like Rachel Griffin's other novel more, but this one just really didn't do a lot for me. I'll start with the things that I did enjoy. I really liked the climate fantasy aspects and how those were used in the story, and just like the kind of fantasy this was. I really liked that. I enjoyed the magic. I thought that was really interesting. And I was also very impressed by how the book won me over to the premise, because like I'm not a big fan of like the super special chosen one kind of trope usually. I like one of the reasons I had put off reading this book, even though I'd heard good things about it, is because I thought I would find it so much more interesting to read about a character who just has one of the season's abilities rather than having to read about one who has all of them. But ultimately I was won over. I ended up finding that really interesting. I also thought the love interest was nice, like he was a likable character. And I also thought that Clara was very believable. Like even when her choices were sometimes frustrating, they always made sense to me. And I could see where she was coming from with her reluctance to use her power and to do certain things. But as I said, this just was really underwhelming for me. Like I said, I liked the love interest as a character, but the romance between him and Clara did absolutely nothing for me. Like it was fine. It was there. I did find this read very quickly. I also listened to this on audio. I will put the narrator in the captions, and I thought she did a good job. Like the audiobook was a pretty engaging way to like read this story, because I think otherwise I would have gotten kind of bored. And even with that, I was still kind of bored. Like, I don't know, I just wasn't very invested in the plot or the characters for sure. Like, I just found it really boring. And also, one of the reasons that I switched to audio for a big chunk of this is that it's written in first person present tense, which is my least favorite combination, and I feel like it's really hard to do well. Like, I think it comes off as really melodramatic very easily, and that's kind of how I felt about this book. And then the other thing that was frustrating about this is there are some characters who are like very unpleasant to Clara, and they're like jerks about things. They like push her to do things in the most like, I don't know, confrontational and aggressive way. So like they are not likable, and I don't approve of what they do. But I also think they kind of have a point. Like, I don't know. I feel like the way they went about things was not good, but their reason they were doing it, like the stakes were so high that I kind of understood it, and I actually was a little frustrated with Clara sometimes and some of the other characters for acting like them being nice to her was like more important or as important as like the lives of these people that were at stake, you know? And I don't think that's what the book was saying, but I do feel like I was maybe more sympathetic towards the antagonists or not antagonists, but like the people who weren't on like Team Clara almost. I think I was more sympathetic towards them than maybe we were supposed to be. So yeah, I just didn't really care about a lot of this book. And the things that I did care about were kind of frustrating or underwhelming most of the time. But it was fine. I gave The Nature of Witches 3 stars. That cover though is stunning. So I'm gonna unhaul this, but I'm sad about it. And finally, the last book I'm going to talk about today is The Mystery of Raspberry Hill by Eva France. And this is translated by AA Prime, translated from the Swedish, which I really enjoyed the Marie C series that AA Prime translated. So it was exciting to read another story that was translated by her. This is a very short one, and it is a like atmospheric, kind of spooky middle grade story. We are following our main character, Stina, who is 12 years old, and she has known for a long time now that she's basically dying. I think she has tuberculosis, but I can't remember for sure. And she knows she doesn't have much longer. She's trying to come to terms with that as much as she can, and so is her family. And then she gets an opportunity to be sent to this sanatorium that might actually help her, that might be able to like make her better. And so she goes there, so she starts like exploring here and everything, and then as she spends more time here, she starts thinking that maybe there is something like sinister going on here, and that maybe the things she's been told aren't exactly true. And yeah, I really enjoyed this one. It is very short, as I said, but I thought the atmosphere was done really well, and I found Stina a really likable and engaging main character, and she felt very believable as a young kid who also has these really serious things that she has grown up knowing. While also this book didn't feel, I feel like, too sad. Like it wasn't really bogged down in that. One thing I will say is I feel like overall this story could have used more fleshing out. Like I did enjoy the atmosphere and the main character, but there were aspects of like the ending and the like kind of solution that I just think needed more time on them, or like could have been set up better. And also I would have liked a little more focus on the characterization. Like I think that that's another thing that if the story were a little longer, that could have been fleshed out more. But overall I really liked this. I also think it would be a great one if you are intimidated by translated fiction. This could be a great one to start with, and I gave The Mystery of Raspberry Hill 4 stars. Okay everybody, so that is the first group of books I read in January, not counting some of the ones for that secret that is no longer a secret project. Don't forget to check that out, and let me know if you are interested in reading any of these books or if you've read them. And if you want to, let me know a book that you had, like that you loved, that you have a very like personal connection to, but that you really struggle to describe or recommend, because that's obviously what happened to me with Phantastes. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!